and muting everybody. And okay, everyone should be in the meeting here. Who's waiting? One other person. Everybody is muted, so I'm going to unmute the members. Bear with me a second here. Okay, are the members all unmuted?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll just go through them. Dan Buxa.
Here.
Roland Raffin.
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson.
Present.
Stuart Friedman.
Present.
Okay. All right, that was the roll call ahead of the meeting, but if everybody's here, so we can, Chairman, you may call the meeting to order.
It is Tuesday, June 9th, 2020, and it is 7:04 p.m. I'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, as we usually do. So I ask you to stand and place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tom, you already called the roll. You have the members in attendance. We'll move on to approval of minutes from May 12, 2020. Did the commission have a chance to review the minutes? And if so, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Buxa.
I've reviewed the minutes and I move that they be approved as presented.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I want to bring up some issues with the minutes.
Okay, Mr. Friedman.
Okay, just the wording of some things. I'm looking at the BZA minutes, and first of all, it would be helpful if they were numbered at the bottom. I know they're double-sided, but in the future, perhaps they could be numbered at the bottom. But anyway, on page 3, where we're talking about BZA docket 22005 with Big Star Developments. And then it says, Mr. John Reed said that he is here with the petitioner. I think the appropriate wording should be he was acting as counsel for him, I believe. So it should say, Mr. John Reed said that he represents the petitioner, Harry Stariha.
That would be correct.
So I would like that wording to be changed. And the same issue is on page 4 with this respect to the Guy Costanza GM contracting matter. And he says, Mr. John Reed said that he has Mr. Costanza with him. I think it should say Mr. John Reed said that he represents Mr. Costanza. So we have a clear understanding of the legal relationship going on there.
Are there any other items that you noticed, Mr. Freeman?
No, that's it.
Mr. Buxa?
Mr. Chairman, I accept those as friendly amendments.
We have a motion with the corrected items on the meeting minutes. Do we have a second?
I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Being no discussion, Tom, would you please call roll?
Stuart Friedman.
Yes.
Daniel Buxa.
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson.
Yes.
Chairman Raffin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next item on the agenda is a preliminary hearing. It is BZA docket number 20-007, Doyle Signs Incorporated, on behalf of Jewel Osco, requesting variances from table 26-6.701.b of the Munster zoning ordinance to permit an additional sign in the front elevation of the building at 716 Ridge Road. Tom, I'll turn this over to you for a presentation before I ask the petitioner to speak.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a request for basically a couple of variances to add a new sign to the Jewel Osco store. In your report, which I've provided the rendering that was given to us. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so what they're asking for is the addition of this drive up and go channel letters with a logo here. There are a couple of variances, like I said, that are required, which they're shown in this table here. We permit one sign per facade, and they're asking for an additional sign. They already have two. So they would have a total of 3 signs on that north facade. And the maximum height of a band sign, which is what we call a wall sign, is 3 feet. The proposed sign is 5 feet. And the materials for a band sign are to be made of metal or painted or stained wood. And they're requesting a sign that is vinyl on white plex. So it would be like a vinyl sticker on a white plastic cabinet type of sign.
Okay.
So those are the I mean, it's actually pretty straightforward, but that's the variance.
Okay. Well, that being said, is someone here tonight to speak on behalf of Jewel Osco?
I believe someone is. I'm looking through the numbers. I don't know exactly. I'm going to start unmuting a few people, and the person.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, I just was unmuted. This is John Streets from Doyle Signs. How is everyone doing?
Good, thank you, Mr. Streets.
Is it okay to...
Can you kind of give us a synopsis of what Jewel Osco is trying to accomplish with a drive up and go sign?
Yes, sir. So thank you everyone for your time, and forgive me if I stumble. This is my very first Zoom related phone meeting I've ever gone to, and I've done a lot of these. Jewel is rolling out their drive up and go service at all of their stores. So far, we've addressed the signs at about 45 of the locations and intend to do the rest of the locations for them. This signage would provide permanent illuminated signs on the building that is consistent with the other style signs, like the Jewel Osco and the pharmacy signs that are basically channel letters with internal illumination that'll light up nicely at night. And it's a sign that is well sized on this very wide storefront. They have over 220 feet of frontage if you take the approximate width of it. And that sign is placed near the entrance closest to where the kiosk is inside the store, to the best of my knowledge. This sign is consistent with their branding. It is, tastefully done, in my opinion. It's done in a fashion that is well visible during the day and at night, but yet not too large or overpowering for that portion of the building. And if these variances are approved for this sign, I think this will be within the intent of your code, which I believe is to properly identify businesses and new services at businesses in Munster. And with that said, I'd like to answer any questions that anyone has with regard to this request.
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
So obviously, since I've been restricted to home due to the pandemic crisis, is this drive up and go concept due to the pandemic crisis? I'm not sure I understand what drive up and go means.
I would say yes. Very much this signage and this program, this service, is much like a public safety. service, something that will minimize contact during a pandemic so people can place their order online, call, or either online or call it in, park into a space, notify them via an app or via the phone that they're waiting for their order in one of the parking spaces near that sign, and someone will take the package and bring it out to your car. And all the money transactions typically handled through the app or via credit card. And it's a fantastic service. I can't say Jewel Osco is the first one to do this service, but it's a fantastic service that really eases the minds of consumers during this pandemic.
Okay, well, because what I'm curious about is before pandemic times, all of the front of the Jewel Osco was a fire lane, as I understand it, where there was no parking allowed. That has never been enforced or monitored by the store. And there's always been a problem with pedestrians able to access safely the doors of the grocery store. And I'm wondering whether this is going to make the situation worse and what exactly is going on with that at this time, I would like to know.
With regard to that, I'm going to be very honest, is I'm not aware of any additional issues that are raised with any of the parking that they have accommodating this drive up and go. That is something I can certainly look further into and clarify exactly where those stalls are and send that into the village. I believe this is our first meeting of several, and I can provide to staff, once I have my hands on it from the client, that information and the hope to ease any concerns with regard to that.
Because, so you're saying that this drive up and go, I mean, it gives the impression that you could pull right up to the front of where that sign is. And you're saying that's not the case here.
Yeah, you're not actually pulling in front of the building where I believe you're saying that fire lane is. These are actual parking stalls that are existing parking stalls that are just designated as the stalls you want to go into, that you want to park into, so that you can reach out to them via the phone or via an app, and they'll bring it right out to your stall. And actually, I did just find a plan while talking that clarifies where these stalls are, and it looks like there's 8 of them according to this plan. Let me see if I can describe where these are in an efficient manner. Give me 1 second while I orientate my north and south. Okay. I would say, now that I know where my north is, these would be the 8 stalls that are in the bottom, in the southwestmost parking.
Right.
So it's not actually intended to have them park in front of that sign.
And Tom, if they put pylon signs inside the parking lot indicating where those stalls are, would that need a variance?
I think provided that they're not branded in any way, they would be permitted.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
my feeling is, and of course, you know, everybody else has to speak, but because I know that Jewel has not been very mindful of the parking regulations and the fire lane parking up to this point, and has consistently ignored monitoring that situation, I would be more in favor, rather than having a sign above which misrepresents the situation and gives the impression you can drive right up to the front of the building. I think that Jewel would be doing a better service by putting those pylon signs, or whatever we want to call them, you know, in the parking lot, so people can see exactly where they are supposed to park, rather than this drive up and go sign. I think it's merely another form of advertising, but that's my impression.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Does anyone else have a comment on that? Mr. Buxton?
Mr. Chairman, a question for Mr. Vanderwood. Mr. Vanderwood, is the Jewel Osco pylon sign along Calumet Avenue legal non-conforming right now?
Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the petitioner if he would be able to talk with his client and see if they'd be willing to negotiate a legal conforming pylon sign on Calumet Avenue as part of these proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. I believe they can also probably put their drive up and go maybe on that sign instead of on the building as well.
Right.
I tend to find out when you go to places like Chick-fil-A, they put you in spots and numbers, and they tell you what number to go to, and you pull into it. You don't need a big sign on the building, like Mr. Freeman said, which is just a form of advertising explaining what drive up and go is. I think they'd be much better served by putting those pylon signs in the parking spaces. And I'm going to echo the same sentiments as some of the other members have stated earlier. Jewel is a neighbor that tends to push their boundaries when it comes to sticking clutter and everything outside of their store. They're consistently putting pallets of mulch and whatever they could put outside the store, lawn furniture, all that stuff for sales, where they've been told year after year that stuff needs to be kept in the store. They're not very neighborly when it comes in regards to that respect, and they need to do better. We don't need cases of water outside the store. You need to keep the stuff inside the store. Now, we give them a permit annually to set up their garden tent, but well before that, they have clutter all over that property, and it's an eyesore in the community, in my opinion. That being said, is there any other comments, or what's the pleasure of the board, since this is strictly a preliminary hearing tonight?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Buxton.
I move that we place BZA docket 20-007 for public hearing with the contingency that they advertise and meet all the town's requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? This is just a preliminary hearing.
I believe Jonathan Peterson is trying to.
Okay, Mr. Peterson.
And somehow I got muted.
Okay.
I wanted to offer an observation consistent with what the board is offering. I think it's confusing that Jewel is proposing to put a sign on the east side of the building, and the parking would be on the complete opposite side of where the sign is located. I think it would lead to a tremendous amount of confusion for patrons, and it could create problems such as what has been suggested by Mr. Friedman, where people will drive up and park there expecting that the deliveries will occur. And my experience suggests that Jewel might possibly start offering curbside deliveries right beneath that sign. And that's clearly a concern, because that entire area is a fire lane.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Right now, we have a motion on the floor to set this for public hearing. Is there a second in regards to setting this for public hearing?
I second that.
Mr. Peterson seconds. Any other discussion? Mr. Vanderwood, would you please call roll?
Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Daniel Buxa. Dan, you're muted.
I can unmute myself.
You're unmuted now.
Yes.
Okay.
I said yes.
Jonathan Peterson
Yes.
and Chairman Raffin.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Streets. Make sure you work with staff to make sure all public notifications and meeting requirements are met for the next meeting.
That I will do. I thank every one of you for your time.
Thank you.
Certainly.
The next item on the agenda is also a preliminary hearing. It's BZA docket number 20-008. There's not a dot. MP Building Partners LLC requesting the following variances in a medical office building at 9445 Calumet Avenue from section 26-4.5.0.1.h.VII.2 to waive the requirement to plant trees within the requiring parking lot buffer from section 26-6.405-S-.2 to waive the requirements to plant thoroughfare trees along Columbia Avenue. Tom, I'll turn this over to you give
Okay, thank you. This is a petition from NP Building Partners, which is the company North Point Orthopedics, that are constructing a orthopedic and medical office building here at 9445 Calumet Avenue. As you may recall, they came before the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Plan Commission last year to get approval to build this building. There were a handful of variances that had been granted for their site plan. They were given permission to not put in a service road or a connection or shared parking between their lot and the lots adjacent to them. They were given a parking variance to have less than the minimum required number of parking spaces, a landscaping variance to have less internal landscaping and fewer trees within the parking lot, and then a setback variance so that they could have a drive aisle closer than 20 feet to the front lot line. So those were approved for the variances. And then they came in later and had a couple of other changes that they requested. Those were to reduce the size of the building, reduce the height of the building. I'm sorry, there's somebody outside the window who's telling me something.
Tornado?
Extreme weather sirens going off.
Trying to get it. I'm not sure what's going on here. He'll come back to my window if he needs me. I do hear a siren though. I'm wondering if there's a tornado.
There's a warning.
Okay. It says take shelter now.
So what should we do, Tom? Should we pause this?
Um,
I'm in a basement, so I know I'm okay. I don't know what the rest of the board situation is.
well, I guess I'll leave it to the board if you want to take a recess.
Gentlemen, what's your thoughts, members of the commission? Or do we keep moving along?
I'm okay.
I'm okay with moving along.
Mr. Peterson?
He's muted again. I think he's in Florida anyway.
Oh, okay, then he's really okay.
I'm okay with proceeding.
Okay, all right, we'll keep moving along.
All right.
Tom, when we go back to this, obviously, there's been a lot of concessions, it looks like, with this building, and in return.
All right, Roland, hold on one second. This guy at my window is, I'm not sure what he's doing.
Maybe he wants to come in. He's outside.
Mr. Chairman, my one question would be why this didn't come up the first time.
Yeah, I was wondering, we went through this a million times with these people.
Well, I hope it's not for the fact that the building's too big and they need more parking spaces on their property.
That was odd, but there's a guy at my window who needs an Uber. And okay, strange times that we live in. So anyway, so as I was saying, they modified the plans a little bit. They came back to the Plan Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals and said that they would, essentially they asked whether or not those changes were compliant with the original approvals, and it was agreed that they were. So more recently, as they begun construction on the building, they called out for locates to do some work along Columbia Avenue. And while they were aware that there was a 60-foot wide easement along the west side of the property, the east side of the property, they were not aware of the number of restrictions. So the Wolverine Pipeline Company, I've been told, has informed them that they cannot plant trees within that easement. So if you'll take a look at this site plan that we have here, you can see that where my mouse or my cursor is tracing along this line right here, that's the pipeline. And it's a 60-foot wide, so it's basically 30 feet on either side. So they've been told that they can't plant the trees that are located within this parking lot buffer.
Now, Tom, when you drive down Columbia by Red Lobster, there's trees in that parkway all the way down.
Yes, there are trees all throughout that area. However, what Wolverine has told them is that they have the authority to cut down those trees, and they will at some point in the future. So they're asking that, basically they're saying that their easement gives them a right to do that. Now that's a legal question as far as what the authority of that easement is, but the applicants are, I guess, sufficiently convinced of the legitimacy of that claim that they are requesting a variance to eliminate these trees from their site plan.
Is it all the landscaping right there, or is it just the trees?
So it's only the trees. The rule that Wolverine uses is they will not permit anything greater than 5 feet in height. So the shrubs would remain. So this was the approved site plan here, and this is the proposed new site plan. So you can see that this parking lot buffer, they've eliminated any trees along here, and they've eliminated most of the trees within the parkway, which is what we call in the zoning code thoroughfare trees.
Well, they have some of the trees in there. Can they add other trees in there? Looks like they have at least a half a dozen of them in there, right?
So these ones here are existing.
Okay.
And these are proposed smaller trees. So more like ornamentals.
Well, it looks like they could probably add some more along the apron and towards the north as well, correct?
You mean right here?
Yes.
That's something that you could ask them. If they're willing to plant them here, why can't they put them here?
Right. And they could probably add a few on that corner. I don't know my pointer to point.
Right here?
Yeah, right over here. It looks like you could add some more trees in there probably.
Well, keep in mind the pipeline is right here.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how clear it is on your screen, but it's basically right here, and it's 30 feet.
So it's that line there?
Yeah, 30 feet to here, and I guess it's to here, but I think that's more than 30 feet actually. It's probably somewhere over here. But in any case, that's where we are. They've provided quite a bit of documentation here. As you can see, I won't go through all of it, but they've provided a number of exhibits, including the easement language. They've provided some emails that have gone back and forth between them and the pipeline company, Wolverine. They've provided some, this is like a manual that the pipeline company kind of adheres to. So the whole thing is in your packet if you wanted to review it. They've also provided some additional emails, like I said, and some court cases that were provided to them by the Wolverine company. So as I said, they're convinced that the path of least resistance as far as getting this project to move forward would be to get a variance so that they don't have to plant those trees.
My question was, this should have been done 6 months ago. when they're doing the drawings and their due diligence with a pipeline on your property and easement.
Right.
Would they have gotten this many variances on internal islands and stuff like that if these trees weren't going in?
I mean, that would be a question for the board to answer because, you know, they did say that, yeah, we've got a substantial amount of external landscaping. While it may not be within the parking lot, you know, we have it on the outside as well as around the building. So that was a factor, I think. That was considered when the variances were granted originally.
Okay. Well, I'll turn it over to board. Is there any kind of questions or comments from the BZA?
Well,
Mr. Buxa?
Just want to renew my note of transparency that I am patient of Dr. McComas. I do not believe that will impact my judgment, however.
Thank you, Mr. Buxa. Anyone else?
well, again, I'm confused as to why not the petitioner did not do an adequate examination of the title work of this property, where it would have shown these easements and these pipelines, and taking that into consideration then. Now they come back to us after the fact. You know, there's a lot of material here to go over. I mean, I don't want to be an obstacle to the erection of this medical facility, but I would like to have as many trees as possible on this property. And I'm concerned about, you know, I want to make a compromise, but I don't want to necessarily eliminate the planting of various trees. So I'm not sure what to do at this point.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Dr. Coltritis.
why can't we have them put the trees back in the parking lot then? If you guys gave them the variance on that, why don't you just tell them to revamp that and have them redraw this up and put them back inside if you took them out already? I mean, they you know, the due diligence wasn't there in regards to them laying this out already. And, you know, they're asking us to take trees out and we want to keep the beautification there. Why not try to put the trees back in within the parking lot?
And that's one option. I guess we'd have to analyze, Tom, we'd have to analyze how many spots they have and how many spots they need. If they lose parking, would they not meet code regarding parking?
Well, they do have a parking variance already, so they're underparked, but they had provided some evidence that they didn't need the required number of parking spaces, which was found to be compelling by the board. I can say that I spoke with the architect, or the project architect, about a possible reconfiguration of the parking lot, making these spaces diagonal rather than 90-degree, which would free up some area within the parking lot to put in possibly a sort of like a median between these parking spaces, which could be planted with trees. But the response that I had received from them was that in order to do that, it could possibly be done, but it would require substantial reconstruction of the drainage in the parking lot and regrading and that sort of thing. So they're already under construction, and their preference is to not have to make any substantial changes.
Sure. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Well, is there somebody here to speak for the petitioner?
That was my next question. Tom, do you know if anyone here, the architect or anyone of a record, is here to speak on behalf of the owner of the project?
Yeah, there are a few people. I'm going to unmute Brendan Crumlish, who's the project architect, and Andy Mollison, who I believe is part of the design team. And Brendan, you can tell me if there's anyone else.
Yes, Dr. McComas should be joining us on another screen. I believe there's an attorney representing North Point, and I think there's also a representative from Wolverine Pipeline on the call.
Okay, I'm just gonna unmute different people here who I don't
Louis
recognize. What was the name?
Kraus.
Oh, okay, I see Kraus here. And
Dr. McComas is on the screen.
I'm not
He's,
seeing him.
I'm sorry, his handle is JPRUIM.
Oh, I don't see him here anymore.
I see him.
Yes, he's there.
Let me check here. Sorry, there's a couple different things that I have to look at here. Okay.
I don't see him on mine. Oh,
Dr. McComas, can you hold your hand up?
Hello?
Tom?
Yeah, he's on there now. I've got him unmuted now.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes,
can
we
hear
can.
Mr. Crumlish, we'll let you speak first since you're the architect on record for this project. We're kind of all questioning how this was kind of missed on regards to the drawing and the civil plan, that there's a pipeline there and now you can't put trees on it.
Yes, I'll basically support everything that Tom has presented. That's a true synopsis of what has taken place. When Hassey Construction began working on the site in January, they were immediately approached by Wolverine Pipeline, watching their activity very closely. Much of the initial work involved some underground utility work, which they were very cautious of. We've since worked through that, and what's before us here are the above grade obstructions, I guess, that Wolverine objects to within this 60-foot easement. It was in January, I believe, that we first received a copy of this 1970, I guess it's a court order describing the limitations of the easement. There are attorneys here who could certainly describe the content of that document much better to you, and how it's to be applied to this. We also received these that several hundred pages of guidelines on pipelines in the United States. I don't believe those are legislated into law. They are suggestions and guidelines for communities to follow. In our discussions with Wolverine, we have learned about a couple of court cases which exempt, I believe, the pipelines, any pipeline, from municipal ordinances such as this. I'm really not the attorney to speak to those. And if you've got questions about that, I think I'd have to hand it over to either the North Point attorney, I think that's John Reed, who's on the call, or Lou Kraus from Wolverine.
Gentlemen, would you like to Reed, and what was the other attorney's name, Mr. Crumlish?
Kraus.
Yeah, I am here, and I was just finishing a study session in another town on a different Zoom conference. But can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we got into when it came time to pull the power service that was required on the site. Obviously, the building's gonna because of the scanning equipment and all the other medical equipment, so it's gonna pull a ton of power. And where they were running the underground conduit to, NIPSCO had an objection to using the current feed to the property. They wanted to use a new feed from a different location. And then that is when the pipeline issue was discovered. Remember, it's in the parkway. not, you know, central to the property, and no one had any reason to believe that you couldn't use the existing feed. NIPSCO preferred them not to use that feed. And that's when it was discovered that it was not just a pipeline, but the Wolverine pipeline folks made themselves known and were not thrilled about building things on top of the easement, although you can do it. Remember, it's just an easement. It's not ownership rights to use the property forever. You're allowed to build a pipeline under it, and as long as the owner doesn't disturb your pipeline, you can do what you want. The problem is if you were to erect a very expensive fence or $30,000, $40,000 sign, the pipeline company has every right to tear it out. And that's when it gets a little bit messy. Building things on top of pipelines isn't uncommon, but if it can be avoided, you should avoid it, generally speaking. And we sort of came to, you know, we all agreed to disagree on what everyone's responsibilities were in regard to that pipeline. And I didn't continue on in those conversations. One of the other engineers might have a better answer as to what NIPSCO's ultimate determination was as to where they had to pull the power from.
I can answer that. It was determined that we could use the original feed that was underground. So wiring was fed back through the original conduits.
So you just had to redirect the conduit on site to that location.
Yes.
And that power runs over the pipeline and not under it, doesn't it, Brendan?
That is correct. Wolverine requested if we put a new service in, they wanted us to go 3 feet below the pipeline at a depth of 8 or 10 feet.
A little expensive and a little hard to repair with some of those.
Yes.
Does anyone know the depth of the existing pipeline right now?
I think it's 6 feet.
So it's 6 feet down.
The top of
the pipe is 3 feet 8 inches down.
Top of the pipe is 3/8 down?
Yeah, and it's 16 inches in outside diameter.
Now, Mr. Cross, have you, did I say your name right?
Kraus, yeah.
Kraus. Do you typically see like smaller ornamental trees sometimes planted near and around pipelines? Because right now it looks like there's about a half a dozen trees out there right now that sit around that pipeline.
Mm-hmm. So if you look at that road, Columbia Avenue, you will see trees there today. You know, over time, the industry has decided, because of things like that PIPA report, to object to trees because they're an integrity threat. You know, our position on trees is that, you know, we define the shrub rule at 5 feet, and we're allowed to cut trees under the easement. So unfortunately, Wolverine, because we're a common carrier interstate pipeline moving large amounts of gasoline and diesel fuel under high amounts of pressure, we strenuously object to the planting of trees within our 60-foot easement. And, you know, we're relying on things like federal law, the Pipeline Safety Act. There's a code of regulation, federal regulations, Title 49, Part 195, that deal with how you are to safely and prudently operate a pipeline. And, you know, there's a picture we submitted, and I think it's Exhibit G or something like that. And it kind of shows what a pipeline excavation looks like. And, you know, if you ever dig a hole like that, you're going 2 feet below the bottom of a pipeline. So if it's, you know, 3 feet 8 inches down and it's 2 feet below that and it's 16 inches in outside diameter, you know, we have to, per OSHA and per the Federal Department of Transportation, Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration, we have when we operate on a high pressure pipeline. And this photo, I think, does a great job of showing why, if you put something on or over a pipeline, you know, it is going to get in the way and interfere with our right to maintain that line, look at it. And so for this reason, it's pretty obvious to us that we need to object, and we need to do the best thing for the safety of the public, which is make the easement as unencumbered and as clear as we can.
Mr. Cross, you don't use trench boxes when you go down there and dig and work on pipelines?
It's possible to use a trench box.
You know, I mean, that's what we do in the mills all the time when we put stuff like that into the ground, you know, for safety and stuff. We don't open cut everything we have because we don't want to restore streets or anything else. So if you can dig that box tight, you're gonna use a treads box so you're not digging more material out or putting more material back in and compacting, right?
I understand that, but it's also a right under the easement to excavate. Right. So it would be giving up that right to agree to excavate in a different manner. So, I mean, it's certainly not a requirement to use trench boxes under the easement.
Okay. I have a question. Mr. Wickland, have you had a chance to review the legal documentation that the petitioner sent regarding previous case and case law?
Dave, you're muted. You're going to have to, there you go.
Now you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Roland, in answer to your question, I very briefly talked with Mr. Kraus this morning. I have not been able to review the legal documents that he submitted.
Okay. But that's something we can have at a legal opinion from the town when it comes to the meeting next month.
Right, right.
Does any other board members have any kind of questions for the petitioner?
No, right now, no.
This is a preliminary hearing, so they're looking to set it to a public hearing, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Make a motion to set BZA docket 20-008 for public hearing at our next meeting, and that the petitioner comply with all the town's notice requirements.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I will second.
Mr. Freeman seconds. Is there any other discussion?
One more to go and then.
Tom, I'll have you call roll.
Stuart Friedman.
Yeah.
Dan Buxa.
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson.
Yes.
Chairman Raffin.
Yes. Gentlemen, you have your request to head to a public hearing. Please work with the town and staff to make sure all the notification requirements are met. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a public hearing. It's BZA docket number 20-006. Andrew and Carly Olchek requesting a variance from section 26-151A1 of the Munster Municipal Code to reduce the required side property line setback for a swimming pool to 3 feet to install a swimming pool in the rear yard at 8316 Castle Drive. Tom, you want to give us a brief synopsis on this again?
Yes, we had a preliminary hearing for this project last month, May 12, 2020. What it comes down to is they're requesting a variance so that they can install a swimming pool that's 3 feet from the property line rather than the required 5 feet. The basis for their request is there is a gas and electric line that runs kind of through the south third of their property, and the Indiana Electrical Code requires that pools be a minimum of 5 feet from an underground electrical line. So they're pushing their pool farther to the south, and they want to be 3 feet from their property line. That's essentially it. The process, as I mentioned at the last meeting, is while this isn't really, this is part of our swimming pool ordinance, so it's not exactly a zoning variance that they're asking for. It's a variance specifically identified in the municipal code for swimming pools, and there are 3 purposes of our code. 1, preserve, protect, and promote the public health, safety, and welfare. 2, protect the general public from damage and/or injury which may be caused by the faulty and uncontrolled construction or maintenance of swimming pools. And 3, preserve the value of adjoining private property. So the board is being asked to take a look at those 3 criteria and determine whether or not this variance would conflict with those 3, and if not, then it would be appropriate to grant the variance. And I know that we have a representative of the applicant here.
Okay, I'll turn it over to the Olczek family to speak first. This way, if we have any questions for either Tom or the petitioner, we can ask it after that. Are the Olczeks here?
We are.
Hi, Olczeks.
Hello.
I know you talked last month a little bit about what you're trying to do. Are there any questions from the board regarding this petition to the petitioners? Okay. Being none.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
I have a question for the petitioner.
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
Ms. Olczek, what is the current size of the fence around your property? What's the height of your fence?
6 feet.
Okay. And Mr. Vanderwood, that
meets code for a swimming pool.
does that? Okay. Thank you.
Yep, I know.
Yes, it does.
Code. Okay. I'll speak. I think it's a worthy petition. I think we should pass it, in my opinion. That being said, it is a public hearing, and if the board doesn't have any other questions for the petitioner or for staff, I'd like to open up to the public hearing at this time. Any questions, gentlemen? Nope.
So I think people need to raise their hand on the board if they want to speak to this petition.
Tom, were there any kind of emails or correspondence from anyone sent to you regarding the petition?
I did not receive any written remonstrance.
Okay. Are there anyone in the Zoom meeting that would like to speak regarding this petition?
I am not seeing any hands going up here.
Going once, going twice, 3 times. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. What is the board's position regarding this variance?
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that we allow the variance so as to reduce the required side property line setback for the swimming pool to 3 feet.
Mr. Chairman, before we entertain that motion, I just want to offer an observation. I am quickly scanning through the attendees, and there's a significant number of attendees that do not have video images. So, but their connections are muted. I think for purposes of ensuring that we adequately fulfill the public hearing portion of this meeting, I'm going to suggest that Mr. Vanderwood unmute every participant briefly so that we can allow anyone to offer their opinion on this. And that way we don't miss anybody that is attending this meeting but is unable to wave their hand to show that they wish to speak. And then once we do that, I think then Mr. Vanderwood, you can remute those attendees. But I think
able to open everybody up.
I can, yes, I can do that. I believe that there's a way to virtually raise your hand, but I'll
do it anyways.
I'll unmute those who I can. I will unmute. Some I need to ask to unmute.
And Tom, all the meeting publications notification requirements have been met, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So since you're unmuting us all and you can hear everybody, yes, to answer whoever's question it was, you can raise your hand virtually on the Zoom call. It's the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. Gives you the options for meeting settings, virtual background, raise hand, and disconnect audio.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes.
So, is there anyone that'd like to speak on this petition before we close it? How's it look? Things opened up, channels open up, or are you still clicking away?
I've asked to unmute everybody and no one has come forward.
Okay. That being said, Mr. Freeman, you had a motion to approve, correct?
Yes, I did.
Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I will second that motion.
Mr. Buxton seconds. Any other discussion? Being none, Tom, please call roll.
Stuart Friedman,
Yes.
Daniel Buxa,
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson,
Yes.
Chairman Raffin.
Yes. Old checks, your motion passes. Make sure you work with the town for any kind of permit requirements you would need to install your new pool.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Good rest of
Bye.
the day. Bye.
Yep. See ya. The next item on the agenda is also a public hearing. It's BZA docket number 20-005, Big Star Development LLC requesting a use variance to permit a single-family residence in a CD4 .A general urban district, a character district at 8319 Jackson Street. Tom, I'll first ask you, has all the meeting requirements been met for this?
I would ask Dave Wickland, since he has reviewed.
Unmute me?
You are unmuted, Dave.
All right. I have received a packet from John Reed. I have reviewed the same, and all legal notices are in proper order.
Thank you, Mr. Wickland.
You're welcome.
Tom, I'll turn this over to you to give us another brief synopsis on this public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, again, so this project was presented, or this request was presented at a preliminary hearing on May 12 last month. And the proposal is to reuse the subject property, which is 2 lots on Jackson Avenue, located here, to reuse them as single-family homes. The current zoning of the district is CD4A, which is a mixed-use district. Residential uses are permitted in this district, but only on upper floors of a building. So there's an overlay that says the ground floor must be used for commercial purposes. Prior to this property being zoned CD4A, it was zoned C1, which was an exclusively commercial district. So for, between 15 or 30 years, it's been single family uses in this entire district have been legal non-conforming. The proposal is to, as I said, kind of rehabilitate these houses, restore them, reconfigure them from the convent that they used to be to a single family home. And the request was made, here's the zoning map. This is the subject property. You can see this is the location within the mixed use district, all of the mustard color. The blue color is single family. Again, this is another, this kind of shows you what the actual uses within that corridor are. As I said, much of it is legal non-conforming single family residential. So the request is for a use variance to, as I said, reuse this as a single family home. So there are some special criteria that need to be reviewed for a use variance, and it differs a little bit from a developmental standards variance in the sense that it does say that the strict application of the terms of this article will constitute an unnecessary hardship if applied to the property for which the variance is sought. So that would be opposed to a practical difficulty. Neither of those terms is actually defined anywhere, but it is a higher bar to merit a use variance. On the previous staff report that I gave to you, I had a recommendation that the property not be granted the use variance. What the Board of Zoning Appeals is actually going to do tonight is not grant the variance. It's going to give a recommendation to the town council, favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation. As I've said at the preliminary hearing, my recommendation would be to think about rezoning the entire area so that the standards that would apply to this property would be broadly applied to that entire district rather than just granting a use variance for one property. At the preliminary hearing, the applicant had suggested that as a sort of condition of their request, that they not just be given a use variance in perpetuity to use this as a single family home, but rather that they still be subject to the legal non-conforming aspect of most of the neighborhood. So there's an alternative recommendation that I've given in my staff report here, which kind of says, if you find that the criteria have been met for a use variance, I would suggest that you apply this condition, which was requested by the applicant, to say that the use variance will expire upon the occurrence of one of the events listed in the Munster zoning ordinance section 26-6.122.c, which lays out the non-conforming use triggers. So if it's a non-conforming use, what causes it to lose its legal non-conforming status? So that would be destruction greater than 50%, a change of use, cessation of use, which would be if they're not using it for a year, then it will revert back to its actual zoning, and then removal of the structure. So those were the four things that trigger the expiration of a legal non-conforming use.
So Tom, if you pass that legal non-conforming with those conditions, it stays the way it is. It's a house basically. It could be used as a house. And then if someone came in as a developer and wanted to develop with that master plan we had, the property is still zoned that way that allows them to build that structure with residential on the second and third floor and retail on the first floor or whatever, right?
Yeah, so it would be, it would basically be sort of frozen in time as a single family use.
Like the
if
rest
somebody
of them.
wanted to do something different, knock it down and put up a new house, they couldn't.
Right.
If anything new happened to it, it would have to be CD4A.
So it's basically would be the same as the rest of the units around there.
Essentially, yes. That's what the applicant had requested at the last meeting as a condition.
Okay. Are there any questions for staff from members of the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Buxton.
I don't know if it's the appropriate time, but I do favor forwarding a recommendation to the Plan Commission for consideration for rezoning.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Buxa.
Mr. Raffin,
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
I do want to disclose, and I stated this at the preliminary meeting, my law office has provided legal representation to Big Star Development in the form of providing commercial and residential eviction services. I think that representation is sufficiently remote from what's before the Planning Commission that I can continue to participate and vote on this matter. But I open that up and invite anyone that might have an objection to my continued participation to so state.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Are there any questions for the staff before I open it up to the petitioner? That being said, Mr. Reed, are you here to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Mr. Reed.
I'm here with the petitioner, also the representative of Big Star Developments. And I agree with everything that Tom just said. This puts us, this developer, back in the same position as all of the surrounding properties of the same character. I think we talked about it a little bit at the preliminary non-public hearing, that's what's odd about this use variance, is that we want to use it just like all of our neighbors use their property. So we don't want to be different. We want to be the same. And what makes us exactly the same, to revert back to single family use, is the application and placing the condition on the property of Munster zoning ordinance section 26-6.122C. That would make it a use variance, but it still would be considered for all purposes a legal non-conforming use. And if and when the transit-oriented development would come to that area, I think just like you asked, if someone came along and wanted to do a type of building that's approved in CD4A, which would be a mixed use commercial residential with commercial first floor, elevator to second or perhaps third floor for residential purposes. And it would be great to see that happen one day. That day's not today. If the economics are there, it will happen. But right now, the hardship that we demonstrate, I think, is given the character of the surrounding property and the fact that the additional traffic load wouldn't move through that area like it would through a TOD type designation, which is kind of what we have. There's really no economic use for the property. What it would cost to build, the fact that you wouldn't get really, I don't think, a first floor commercial tenant off of over a block and a half off of a commercial street. We don't think there would be any reasonable economic use for it under that particular code. But what Tom said is accurate down to the T, that what we would ask for is just to, we're really asking to is to revert to what we were before the property hadn't been used for a year. And we'll go right back into really what it would amount to exactly a legal non-conforming use that would expire upon all those same conditions as it had previously.
It would be two single family homes.
Correct. They used to be connected. The connection was removed to make the two homes before they were used for a common use. Although it's not a bad idea. I'd like to have my home connected to the home that my children live in where I could lock the door, but they won't let me do that.
Well, or your wife might want to lock you out, Mr. Reed.
That's a very distinct possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Reed and petitioner before I open it up to a public hearing? Nobody? All right, Tom, same thing. Would you, can you unmute anyone you can unmute? So we go through the same thing so we can ask if anyone would like to speak on behalf of this petition.
Yes, I will do that.
And as Mr. Gephardt said, there are 3 dots if you're calling in on phone that you can click on to be able to use those, use that tool to raise your hand as well if you're calling in by phone and not on your computer. And Tom, you just let me know when the floor is opened up and I'll give it the going once, twice, and 3 times.
Okay, I've asked to unmute everybody and I'm watching to see if any hands are being raised electronically. And I'm not seeing anything here.
Well, that being said, I'll give it going once, twice, 3 times. Tom, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Hearing all the evidence tonight, what is the thoughts and consensus of the BZA? I'll give you my opinion. I'll give you my opinion just because I haven't said much. I think it's a good thing to turn these into a legal non-conforming with the following stipulations. I think at this time, you know, that's what the neighborhood is. They're single family homes. Looking at the picture and the diagram and map that I have, it fits in with the neighborhood, but it also gives the town of Munster with those conditions that if any of those things change, you know, it brings it back to the C1 district. Plus it also gives us the opportunity if someone as a developer comes in, he knows that's the C1 district, the TOD district comes in, and it gives the opportunity for economic enhancements in that area in the future. That's my opinion. Anyone else have any opinions? That being said, are there any motions regarding this variance?
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Boxa.
I'm prepared to make a motion, but I had a quick question about property taxes. If it does become a TOD district, do those taxes revert to the TOD or does the town retain them?
Dan, are you referring to a TDD, the Transit Development
I'm sorry,
District?
yes, my apologies, yes.
That's a good question. I would think that it's based on the property values and not necessarily the use of the property, I don't believe. So regardless of how it's zoned, you know, if it was a more intense use, it would generate a higher property tax. And so therefore the increment collected in that transit development district would be greater.
Okay.
Right. I think, Tom, and I don't mean to chime in here as not being on staff, but I think at the time the town went through a lot of this, it almost is like a TIF within a certain radius of the station itself. The increase in value would go to a separate fund source, but the base value would stay frozen and would continue to come to the town. I don't think it's not 100% capture. It's an increase. And I think the radius is actually relatively tight.
So we haven't, yes,
that's very helpful.
That's correct, John. Yes, it's the increment that's captured like a TIF. And we haven't, the town has not drawn the boundaries of the transit development district yet. So that'll happen this year, maybe.
I hope so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Buxa.
I'm prepared to make a motion if you are ready.
Yes, Mr. Buxa.
I move that we send a favorable recommendation to the petitioner's request for a variance along with the 4 contingencies that Mr. Vanderwood outlined in his document.
Based on the legal non-conforming status.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second that motion.
Mr. Freeman seconds. Is there any discussion regarding this motion? Being none, Tom, I'll ask you to call roll. And this is a favorable recommendation of the town council.
Correct.
Tom, would you please call roll?
Yep. Stuart Friedman.
Yes.
Daniel Buxa.
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson.
Yes.
And Roland Raffin.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Next item is findings of facts. BZA 19-009, Guy Costanza, GM Contracting, requesting developmental standards variances from section 26-931 to reduce the number of required parking spaces from section 26-602 to reduce the required setback in order to construct a 2,800 square foot building and parking lot for use as a cafe at 407 to 411 Ridge Road. Has the BZA had a chance to review these findings of facts? And if so, is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Buxa.
I make a motion to approve the findings of fact for BZA 19-009 as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I have reviewed this and I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this? Tom, would you please call roll?
Stuart Friedman.
Yes.
Daniel Buxa.
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson.
Yes.
Roland Raffin.
Yes. Motion passes, Tom. The next item on the agenda is findings of facts as well. BZA docket number 20-004. Libro Inc., Tony Hannes, requesting a conditional use permit for a restaurant with outdoor seating, outdoor dining in a CD4A district in order to operate an outdoor dining area at 313 Ridge Road. What's, yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Buxa.
I make a motion to approve the findings of fact for BZA 20-004 as presented.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I would second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion?
Roland, may I make one comment?
Yes, Tom.
There was an amendment or a revision made to the town council, or I'm sorry, to these findings of fact. It's the last line on here. This was just put up today. So if anyone had printed that out previous to today, it's a little bit different. And it just includes that the recommendation was made to the town council and adopted by the town council.
Mr. Buxa, Mr. Freeman, are you comfortable with this findings of fact as presented?
Could you make that a little bit larger so I could see that, Tom? I don't see I see the revision that was made.
Dave, is this the revised version or is this the original version?
Let me take a look. Bear with me. No, this is the revised. This is the revised version.
Okay, so
okay, it says here, and recommended same favorably to the town council.
Correct.
All right.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with it also.
Okay. Tom, would you please call roll on this BZA docket?
Yep. Stuart Friedman?
Yes.
Dan Buxa?
Yes.
Jonathan Peterson?
Yes.
Roland Raffin?
Yes. Motion passes. There's no additional items for discussion on the agenda. Correct, Tom?
That is correct.
Our next regular meeting is July 14, 2020 at 7 p.m. Tom, do you think this will still be a Zoom or will we be back in the town hall?
I think we'll be back in the town hall. We may have an electronic option available as well, though, because I'm not sure. We may be limited in how many people we can actually have in the room at one point at the same time.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, gentlemen, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, I think
you want to give a few minutes for the next one?
I would put it to those members who are part of the BZA and the Plan Commission. If you guys want to take a break, we can. If not, I'm prepared to continue.
We might as well take a break for like 10 minutes. That way we can start right on time at 8:30.
I just need 2 minutes.
Okay.
I just need 2 minutes.
All right, then I will
work on technical.
Pause the recording for a second. Okay, we're now recording again.
All right, hey, this is Bill Baker. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Munster Plan Commission for June 9th, 2020. Please set all your devices to stun, and we'll ask Mr. Vanderwood to do, well, no, I'm going to do the Pledge of Allegiance first, aren't I? How long have we been doing this? So let's stand up for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag, of the
United States of America, to the republic to which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God bless America. Roll call, please, Mr. Vanderwood.
Councilor Kulturitis.
Present.
Councilor Gardner.
Present.
Stuart Friedman.
Present.
Roland Raffin.
Present.
Brian Specht.
Present.
And Chairman Baker.
Present. All right, let's roll.
Councilor Tulowitzki is absent with notice.
With notice. So we do have a quorum, correct?
We do.
All right, let's roll. Next up is the approval of the minutes of May 12th, 2020. I sent some comments, Mr. Vanderwood. Those have been incorporated. Did anybody else have any modifications, statements, motions? What say you?
So, Bill, just for your edification here, the comments that you sent, I'd like to just read them because they are not on the document here on the website.
Okay.
So I will just, for everyone's, there's been a request that the first sentence here, Mr. Vanderwood said that the previous version of the zoning code permitted 6-foot sentences in rear yards. That should say 6-foot fences. There was a request to clarify this section here where it says the proposed amendment would rectify that and clarify that we are permitting electronic gas station price signs on monument signs. So we'll make that correction. And then in one of the paragraphs down here, it references a Mr. Anderson, and the request was just to clarify that that's Dustin Anderson. So those were the requests for amendments to the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve as corrected.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Seconded.
And a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Giddy up. Next up is preliminary hearings, to which we have none. Next up is a public hearing. Before I start talking, anything to say before I start, Mr. Vanderwood? No?
Yeah, PC 19-012.
Yes.
I received communication from John Reed representing the petitioner, as well as Don Toringa, stating that the applicant is in the hospital and unable to present tonight, so he's requesting a continuance to next month.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to continue.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Mr. Vanderwood, just out of curiosity, and this might be a Mr. Wickland question, can we keep adding these things on and continuing ever, or is there a certain daylight on one of these things?
In answer to your question, I think that with the flexibility of the Plan Commission, you can have several hearings. Tom, I don't think we have any rules for the Plan Commission, do we, that might indicate otherwise?
We don't. We don't have any procedural or zoning code rules that would prohibit us from continuing it essentially in perpetuity.
Right.
So it would be at the discretion of the Plan Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, next up for a public hearing is PC 20-003, Maple Leaf Crossing LLC, Jay Leeser, requesting amendments to the Munster Business Complex Plan Unit Development in 9450 Calumet Avenue. Tom?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have a staff report for this project, but there are a number of exhibits that were provided for the Plan Commission's review. I'll say that last month you approved the preliminary plat conditioned upon staff review and approval of the engineering plans. So we did that review and sent a list of comments. The revised plans are included here on the website agenda page. They're dated June 5th, I believe. This petition here is for revision to the planned unit development. So what they have as far as the documents here is an ordinance, which includes design standards, development standards, and tell me if you can see this. It's coming up as a Word document on my
I can see it
here. Okay, so they provided this ordinance. This is an ordinance that will go to the town council if forwarded on by the Plan Commission, and then it includes these development standards, which are kind of like the rules for the zoning district. Because as I said at the preliminary, or at the last public hearing rather, a planned unit development is kind of a unique zoning district. It has its own standards and rules. So this document provides those standards and rules.
Tom, who wrote these rules? The town?
This was written by the applicant. So that was provided to me.
Them.
Pardon?
Who reviewed them? I mean, it said we're all building little pink houses or what?
Well, we can go through them if you want, but I'd rather have the applicant go through them and describe what they're proposing.
Okay.
So I'm just going to outline what they have here, and then I can tell you that the applicants are here and they can present them to you for your review, if that's okay with you.
Right.
As an attachment, so in this ordinance, it references two things. One, it references a landscaping plan, which has been provided here. It's just shown here. So the landscaping for the project will be essentially completed as shown in that landscaping plan. And then it also references a site plan, and that's the engineering plans that were submitted last month as part of the preliminary plat, reviewed by staff, revised according to our comments, and then now provided back. I will say that those are still under review by our town engineer. Those were given to us on Saturday. So I forwarded those to Jill, as of Monday morning. So she's, you know, she's in the process of reviewing them. So that would be those items. And then they've also provided here a traffic and parking study, which kind of talks a little bit about how much traffic will be generated in the development and how many parking spaces would be needed for the various uses. So that all that material was turned into the town, and we're providing it to you for your review. I think they were posted today or yesterday afternoon.
All right, before we bring it to the board, Tom, let me ask a couple of questions. So are we doing these one at a time? Is the whole thing as a approval to the council? What say you here?
Yeah, so the question before you tonight is to make a recommendation with respect to the PUD amendment. So the amendment to the planned unit development, and that includes all of the items here because they're referenced within that ordinance document that I talked about. So this ordinance makes reference to the other documents. So the request would be to approve it, and you would be approving it all.
Okay, so I'm trying to think, so we don't run this like a BZA meeting. We're here for 2 hours. How to best each one of these things, because they all roll up into the ordinance, correct?
That is correct. We can go through them one by one.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Let me make a suggestion, and obviously this is up for the board's discussion. I mean, the plan set, you know, obviously has the majority of the sheets as it relates to what's going to happen on the site, and everything feeds off of that. We also have a public hearing, so we have to open it for that. And we also should let the petitioner make a statement as it relates to how they would want to do that. So that's kind of my thought. If anybody else has a thought, please say so. On the board.
Mr. Chairman, I think you should go through these one at a time. Some of these things I've reviewed in the past because it's came before us regarding the engineering and that kind of stuff. You know, the civil package. To be honest with you, the leaf ordinance got thrown at, I mean, the maple leaf ordinance and that kind of stuff got thrown at us yesterday. Didn't even have a chance to go through all that stuff. I said in the BZA meeting, I said there needs to be a consensus that things get to the BZA and Plan Commission 7 days in advance, because it's not fair to not only the members of the commission to vote on something, it's not fair to the town without adequate review.
Thank you. I concur. Anybody else have a statement on the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I also agree with Mr. Raffin's comments that we should in the future have these documents presented to us at least 7 days prior to the meeting.
Well, you know, and I brought this up as well. It seems to be those projects that the town's involved with, we have these kind of challenges. So maybe some of the elected officials can enlighten us as to how we're supposed to go through this with a town deal as we get this information at the last minute. And let's face it, we all have a job, by the way. So it makes it a little tough to do what we're supposed to do.
Well, if we actually received this information a couple of days ago, I don't think it's fair to any one of you to move forward with this. Even though I'm in favor of this project, but I mean, if everybody has not been able to actually review this information, then we should have the opportunity to do that. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, one last comment from me. I don't think you need to get the developmental standards done today. I don't think you need to get the landscaping done today. The traffic parking study we can go through today, but when it comes to the plan set of engineering, that's probably more critical to be able to start doing some of the infrastructure. We don't know what tenants are going to go in there yet. They don't even have the buildings done yet, but you can get the parking areas done, the underground, the sewers and that kind of stuff. Maybe we can talk to the petitioner on what his intentions are with all this stuff that's being presented in front of us before we start making assumptions.
Okay, and before I ask Tom to unmute the petitioner, Tom, I mean, where are the actual discussions between staff and the petitioner as far as getting the work? Because last month's meeting, it was to start the engineering and not trying to lose any of this construction season. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, at the last meeting, the engineering plans were approved sort of contingent upon staff review. So that was the preliminary plat. That would have permitted the installation of the infrastructure and, you know, some site work to be done. We did review, staff did review those plans that week, and we did an internal site plan review committee meeting like we normally do, but it was staff only per the recommendation of the Plan Commission. And we did send the comments, a whole set of comments to the petitioner. They had asked that certain comments be waived, so that did occur. And then the revised plans were submitted to us as at a staff level on Saturday. So we are now reviewing the revisions to ensure that they've all sort of been done per our comments. So that's where that is. I would say that, you know, the engineering plans have already been sort of conditionally approved. So that doesn't need to get reapproved, except in the sense that it's referenced in that ordinance. So you could continue on with the preliminary plat part of it as a separate piece, and that would be the engineering plans. You know, ideally they would be put together, but given the timing, I think the Plan Commission has already indicated that they're willing to kind of separate those. So that separation's already been done. I think we can, you know, can continue on that path.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Sure. Everybody on the board, y'all got the memo from the town manager, and you have that. I don't know where that fits in, Mr. Wicklund, as it relates to what we're doing, but, you know, we could work through that. But I think, you know, most important is that we should at least hear from the petitioner, Tom, to get some idea kind of where his thought process is, so we can kind of find a happy medium in this interesting situation.
Yeah, I mean,
is there somebody to speak on this?
Let me unmute. It looks like I've got Don Toringa, Jay Leeser. Jay, maybe you can tell me if there's anyone else on the line that would be speaking. I've got a 312 number here. I'm not sure who that is.
No, I'm here. Pete is with me. If everyone can hear me, we can talk about it.
Yeah, could you speak up a little bit, please?
Pardon me?
Can you speak up or feed the squirrels, or speak up a little bit, please?
My name is Jay. I'm the petitioner here.
I can't hear him.
We're having some.
That's not me.
Okay, I'm gonna mute everybody but Jay and Bill for the time being.
We've submitted, Toringa did a engineering plan that was redone from last meeting that would allow us to do the underground for Maple Leaf, pretty detailed. The set was sent on Saturday by Don Toringa, but there's the backstory to that. We didn't get anything back from the town manager till Wednesday night on a 50 line item redo by Tom earlier in the month. Dustin responded to our comments Wednesday night, which would be what, June 3rd. So we reacted with stuff to Attorney David Westland on the following day, the Thursday. And just so you know, so Don Tringa worked very hard to get it back and done for Saturday. So there's both two sides of the story, but we do have it in. And I'm sorry it's late, but there's another side. Anyways, I'm here to take any questions with David Beach that anyone wants to throw at us.
And maybe I can just provide a little more background. You know, the original ordinance for the Munster Business Complex was Ordinance 1701, which was passed with the old zoning code. You can see we've updated it for the current code. The new ordinance that you have, as much as I could, I worked with Dave Westland, and we included.
I'm sorry, wait a minute. Who's speaking? Is this still Leeser?
This is David Beach. I'm here with Jay.
Oh, okay. There's no video, so
hold on.
Before Mr. Beach, you need to introduce yourself in a public meeting.
Billy, let me try to get you video. Hold on. How do you do that?
Well, anyway, yes, I'm David Beach. I'm here with Jay Leeser.
Here we go.
When we got the comments Wednesday night, we met with Don and went over those and incorporated those into the ordinance, which I've discussed with Dave Westland. The ordinance that you have before you, if you compare that to 1701, you'll see that the building materials and standards are largely unchanged. What is changed is the permitted uses has been updated to be the SD PUD, which is in the new code. And then as far as the site layout, those, which would be sections 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, those have all referenced the site plans that you've already approved. So it's taken the old code, updated with what you have in the new code, and then incorporated the site plan that you already approved at last month's meeting. And we've, as the town recommended, we've divided into 7 lots with 2 outlots. If you can approve this, then we can record the site plan, which will allow us to get going with all of the underground improvements, the storm sewers, the sanitary sewers, the water lines, what have you, to supply the site.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Unmute the board, please, Tom. Does anybody have any questions for the petitioner as far as that statement? Please.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Beach, Mr. Leeser, hey, quick question for you. So when it comes with the developmental standards on the project right now, to be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to read through all those pages yet between work commitments and stuff. But if that got pushed to next month, but you had the package done, you know, with the, let me go back to my other thing in regards to the civil package, you know, that we kind of approved before, as long as the corrections were made, wouldn't that be able to keep you going?
If we could get final approval of the site plan so that we could record it, that would allow us to, yes, to get moving on site work and construction.
Right. So we don't have to focus really on landscaping right now, because that could be adjusted as the buildings are going on. We don't have to really focus on the developmental standards. We want to get the site plan approved so you can record it and be able to start with your infrastructure.
Yes,
correct.
Perfect. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, I have one question. With regards to a 4-story office building, the last time I recall we talked about this, it wasn't going to be quite large, but now we're looking at almost 60,000 square foot plus office building, plus a 4-story hotel. I'm back to the parking thing again, as far as this, if it's done in phases, because I noticed in the drawings there's a phase 1 and phase 2. So is the phase 1 a construction phasing, or can you explain how you are planning to move that along? The goal being that we don't have the same situation that we had at Lake Business Center and Centennial Village, where we have a bunch of buildings and half of the rest of the development is still unfinished, and we're parking on mud and gravel.
Yeah, the first phase, Mr. Chairman, is going to be the 2 north buildings, which wouldn't be started until obviously all of the site work is done. The hotel and the office building, and you'll see in our traffic study applying the town's new traffic code with the overlap. There's expected to be, I'm sorry, we're getting a lot of feedback or reverberation here. The time when the hotel will be using the parking lot is when the office building will be empty, and vice versa.
So I don't understand how we're doing the vice versa. So having some experience with office buildings, people show up from 7A maybe to 9A and stay from 5 to 7P, which is usually the same time that there's transition at the hotel. What's the vice versa, Mr. Beach?
Well, I believe the town's code has a 1.7 reduction factor for hotel and office building, and the usage and high usage times.
So you're using the town as the benchmark for how this is going to work? Well, they know.
We had a traffic study done, which of course looked at, reviewed, and took into consideration the parking ordinance from the town's new code.
Okay. I mean, we're virtual, so you can't see all my hand motions now, but maybe you can, because I'm looking at the thing. But where it says phase one with the 2 buildings that you're going to do the construction first, with 2 being at a later date.
Right. The 2 buildings on the most northern part of the property would go in first, and then the 2 buildings on the southern part of the property would be part of the second phase.
Okay, thank you. So the other members of the commission didn't get a chance to look at anything. What happened with Maple Leaf Boulevard and the whole 40-minute discussion about how wide that is? Has that been resolved?
Well, in my recollection, it was shrunk into that size that when we had that discussion from 60 to 40.
And, we don't have a staff report, Tom, so, I'm trying to look through 73 documents on this little screen. So where is this?
So with respect to that,
it turns into another mess. Everybody's going to point to us and say you approved it.
Well, with respect to the road question, that was resolved a couple months ago when the question came to the Plan Commission as part of kind of a site plan approval that was granted, where it was decided that the road right-of-way would be reduced from 60 feet to 40 feet to accommodate additional parking on the site. So that is reflected here on these plans. This is the plat, which actually has been revised substantially from the one that was shown to you last month. So that some of those revisions have been made. But yeah, the road is shown here. It's 40 feet through this area, and then it widens out. There's a turning lane added here. I should say the right-of-way is 40 feet. The road is 24 feet wide. And there's a 10-foot bike path.
Chairman Baker?
Also a 6-foot green space between the bike path and the road.
Chairman Bacon, this is Brian. I kind of agree with Roland that, I mean, I understand the council's desire to get this going and Mr. Leeser's desire to keep, to start underground and stuff. And I thought that's what we approved last month, but obviously it's taken some time to get to the final site plan done. I mean, I guess if the town and Tom are suggesting that we, you know, they're good with the site plan now, that, you know, maybe we move forward with that. So Mr. Leeser and Mr. Beach can start their underground and everything. And then we have time to review the documents over the next 30-day period. So then we can review them at the next meeting and look at landscaping and, you know, the requirements of the buildings and so forth. But I don't think we're all prepared to make a quick decision on this when the town got it on Saturday and we got it whenever we got it, because I was out of town as well and just got back into town today. So I didn't review it sitting in a car. So because that wouldn't have been very safe driving.
And I don't know, I mean, Mr. Spector, I mean, did the location of the buildings really change? And maybe this is more of a question for Tom, because I don't think they have they?
No, not that I understand. Have they, Tom?
No, no, they haven't. Based on what you see here tonight is it's technically there are some modifications that have been made, you know, locations of fire hydrants and things like that, but the engineering is substantially the same.
Okay.
And you all saw the comments that were provided in the staff review, both the initial staff review that were provided the week after the approval, and then the subsequent letter from Dustin Anderson that modified that review. So you've seen those comments. Those are the way the plan has changed, or the engineering has changed. But they are not changing the locations of the buildings. They're not really changing the locations of the parking, the number of parking spaces, the types of uses, pathways. None of that's really changing.
You know, and the only thing that I could say is I know the importance of getting this done for the town and for the petitioner. I just got to tell you, a 60,000 square foot office building and a hotel with this kind of parking, it's going to be just like Five Guys. It's going to be beautiful to look at, and it's going to be a very challenging in and out. Because think about not only the people that work in the building, but the people that come and visit. And, you know, I didn't go to Purdue, but not a lot of people are going to walk to this place. I'm sorry.
We're a walking town, Mr. Baker.
That's what everybody tells me. So,
Mr. Baker.
In our defense, we did pay for the parking traffic study.
I can't see who.
We did pay and have a parking and traffic study for this 6-acre development as was required on the flow of traffic based on the town code with 1.7 cars per with the professional office building and hotel usage. So the traffic.
But that's using the whole site, isn't it, Mr. Leeser?
Pardon?
Is that not using the entire site?
That's the whole site, correct.
Correct. So I know you were going to park over here by the Canadian Nationals to walk to the office building.
Well, I would tell you this, the way that we've worked with the staff for the last year to make ingress and egress with parking and walking through buildings and paths and be able to make it a very walkable, sustainable development has been attained in this drawing through multiple changes. So
I understand.
Okay.
And but I'm from the region, and I watch people drive around to park close to the gym front door to go work out. So I'm just saying that there's going to be that challenge. I mean, I understand it's walkable and it meets all the parameters. I'm just pointing that out. So does the Five Guys development.
Chairman Baker, if I may, I have reviewed the parking study that was provided. I took a look at that today. And from the way I read it, it appears that phase 1, if it is constructed such that the parking is in place when the buildings are completed and opened, they will have sufficient parking in that phase 1 for the uses of phase 1. So if they have and if you look at the screen here, you see this kind of pink line going across here.
Mm-hmm.
Parking required by these two uses is 198 spaces. That's per their study. These parking spaces represented north of this pink line here, there's 219. So I think if they do this phasing the way that they're proposing it, and as long as the parking is built, you know, ahead of the buildings or in conjunction with the buildings, they should be covered with respect to parking. Likewise, this south phase 2, that's self-contained in the sense that they would have enough parking spaces on that site to accommodate those uses. So I think those—
And I don't know what those uses are though, Tom, as far as the parking study, but in my past experience, it's been 4 per 1,000 for an office use. So, you know, I mean, I'm pointing this out because I hope it's overwhelmingly successful. The location's outstanding. We need Class A office space. I just hope it doesn't become a hindrance in the lease up. That's my only 2 cents. And it's beautiful. I get it. I mean, I absolutely do. And it would be a little easier to be more confident if you didn't put a 4-story hotel next to it. So, I mean, at 4 per 1,000, at 60,000 feet of office, I'm looking at what, 240-ish for parking, just for the building, office building. So I don't know the parameters that are being used in this new walkability concept, and that's great. But as the population ages and it continues to snow here every winter, that tends to always have an impact on what happens, at least in my experience. And I'll stop talking. Oh, I take that back. I can't because I have to ask about.
We all knew you were bluffing.
You know, I get it. And then we got the Pepsi truck thing still happening, right?
That's correct. That's been factored into the traffic study.
Mm-hmm. And since you had a chance to review that, and those of us that don't do this for a living, for the town, haven't, what does it say about that stoplight as far as the timing, and how is that going to be managed is the most important thing. Putting the light there and paving the road is one thing, but how are you going to manage that light with the traffic going north and south on Calumet Avenue?
So it does reference the amount of, it does provide a count of at the intersection. I don't believe it is prescriptive with respect to the signal timing, but it does show and I'm pulling this up here, what they're anticipating the traffic would be.
We agreed to do a traffic study once the 45th Street underpass is completed, so traffic can be at a normal rate.
I can't hear him.
He just says needs to do the 45th Street connection has to be done, and then you'll do another traffic study to make sure that it meets that current rate, because the counts are going to change, obviously, when 45th Street gets through.
Correct. So you can't get a legitimate traffic study until 45th is done. And our traffic study was based on our site traffic in and out of the development.
So Tom, what's the town's parameters in managing something like this, to the point if nobody's paying attention to what's happening on site, and we have truck traffic and all of the successful participants in this Maple Leaf development coming to that light, who's doing that now once it passes all of these bureaucratic requirements? Is that you?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow exactly what you're asking.
Who's setting the timing on the light?
Oh, that would be, well, ideally we would have a study that would indicate a traffic study, a detailed traffic study, and an actual signal intersection, analysis that would tell us what to put there.
Mm-hmm. And that analysis
hasn't been determined who
give
is.
you the traffic, the truck traffic as well?
Yes, it would take into account the truck traffic that is leaving and entering, if any. It would tie it in ideally to the rest of the signals on Calumet so that they would all be in sync.
How is that being handled now? I mean, how often is the town syncing the lights on Calumet Avenue?
So the last time there was a comprehensive study done was, I believe, in 2014. But it's continually monitored and kind of tweaked. So for example, when when we eliminated the signal at 45th, which is currently gone, it was adjusted at Franlin to add a few seconds at Franlin so that traffic could be, use that detour. So it's being monitored by our town engineer and sort of, tweaked as necessary. As far as doing like a sort of like a comprehensive study and a recalibration, I would think that the appropriate time to do that would be after 45th is complete, because we will see a new traffic pattern and different volumes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, we got to open this thing up for a public hearing then. So let me do that. Mr. Wicklund or Tom, have they met all parameters as far as putting out the public notice?
Yes.
Yeah, this has been on the agenda for a while, so they advertised months ago for this.
So yes.
Yes.
And then we're doing a public hearing on all of these items?
This would be a public hearing on the planned unit development amendment.
Which is the ordinance?
Which is the ordinance and all the attachments that are referenced in the ordinance, yes.
But Tom, we could pick and choose on if we want to table some other things, correct?
So you're going to be issuing a recommendation to the town council. So it would be a favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation. Or you would table the matter. You can't deny it. You can't really approve it. You're just making a recommendation. Yeah, so I think you kind of have to recommend, and Dave Wicklund, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think you have to sort of recommend it either with conditions. So if you want, I guess if there are things that you weren't comfortable with, you could recommend it favorably with conditions, or table it. I think those would be the two options, really.
It's hard to make conditions if you're not versed and ready to make conditions on something.
Tom,
it's an all or none.
Yeah, but haven't we already discussed that the Plan Commission received this on Monday to review this and haven't had enough time to really review this, the plan unit development ordinance? I don't think it's really the wishes of the Plan Commission to make a judgment on that until they can review it in full.
That would be a recommendation. I mean, that would be
probably
the vote that you would make then, I guess. If that's what you felt, then I think the appropriate thing to do would be to table. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, they could forward with no recommendation. They could do that and then sort through, the ordinance and the attachments once they get it in hand. It's really what the Plan Commission wants to do. Plan Commission wants more time, take the time. If you don't, any recommendation to the town council is going to put it in their lap to decide.
But Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm comfortable approving the Maple Leaf Crossing plan set because that is strictly the engineering and the locations of those buildings on that property. And that's been gone over and over again. Mr. Leeser, that's one of the things you need, correct, to get started?
Correct.
Right.
The landscaping and the.
What's that?
The landscape plan.
That's irrelevant right now because you can add whatever plantings if they change down the road as you get closer with the site development plan review when you come back with your building materials and all that stuff, right?
Correct. The landscaping is 10 months away.
Right. And ordinance, obviously, that's something that could be tweaked in a month or whatever of what kind of businesses you're going to be trying to lease out to or some of the materials you're going to build with. Because you still have a month of infrastructure going on before you even get to design of those buildings and foundations and all that kind of stuff, right?
Correct. We'd like to get the Turinga site plan and engineering approved tonight so we could put it out for bid and have earth moving equipment on the site next month.
So Mr. Lee, you're fine with the other stuff being tabled till next month, correct?
And then David has a question on the ordinance to just convey what was from ordinance 1701 from a few years ago to now.
Yeah, and Roland, what we have here is essentially general sense of what materials would be permitted. When we come to any individual building, we'll be back before you with specific plans and specific materials for that building. It would have to be a subset of what's in here so that, you know, as far as the building materials and standards, you would be reviewing each of those individually as each building comes out, before each building comes out of the ground. This is just a general list of materials that could be considered for use.
Okay. Well, that being said, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Maple Leaf Crossing plan set based on the engineering, making sure it's reviewed and approved and per state and local codes that it meets our ordinances. And I'd like to table the Maple Leaf ordinance, the landscape plan, and the plant list till next month.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second. I'll second.
And a second. So the discussion, I'll start. Mr. Wicklund, this seems to be exactly what is opposite of Mr. Vanderwood's statement, is that we have to do this as a package. But yet you're saying we have the authority to order a la carte, for lack of a better description.
Yes. I think that the Plan Commission has that authority. But what I'm hearing tonight is more give it another month to study it because the Plan Commission hasn't seen the documents.
Well, we have a motion and a second, so I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but you know, moving forward, then is this a recommendation to the council on what the motion states, or is this an approval of that set by the Plan Commission?
It's a recommendation on sending the Maple Leaf Crossings plan set to the town council for a favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission. And like I said before, when it comes to landscaping, the ordinance and the plant list, we can approve that as we come down the road or next month as a site developmental plan comes in front of us in regards to building standards of materials and stuff like that.
And I agree with that, Bill. I agree with Roland's assessment.
Okay.
Bill, can I make a suggestion here? The engineering plans have already been approved by the Plan Commission as part of that preliminary plat approval. So it was approved last month. Again, it was severed from the PUD last month and given to the staff to review as part of the preliminary plat. And so that piece of it is already under review, and it's sort of in the process of going through that staff approval that was requested by the Plan Commission. So I guess my suggestion would be that that part doesn't need to go back to the town council for approval because it's already been approved as part of that preliminary plat. Ultimately, it will become an attachment to that PUD amendment, which is that ordinance and the other items. And that will get sort of approved by the town council as part of a zoning change. But I mean,
So Mr. Vanderwood, if it doesn't have to go in front, and I'm not the legal representation, Mr. Wickland, so if it doesn't need to go in front of the Maple Leaf Crossing plan set, does not need to be sent as a favorable recommendation to town council because it already has. Can I amend my motion to make it approved tonight so Mr. Leeser can get going on the infrastructure for that property tomorrow, if he can pick up a permit from the building department, if all the engineering documents meet the codes, and he said they have, because they've been.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that you don't need to make that motion, Roland, because it's already been made last month.
Then why is this set still on here for me to vote on or not? It shouldn't even be on there.
It's on for findings approval. It's on for finding approval. The findings for that part of the puzzle are on the agenda for findings. Requesting preliminary plat approval to consolidate 2 lots into a 1-lot commercial subdivision. That's why it's on the agenda. It's on the agenda to approve the findings that were found last month. Right, Tom?
That's correct. It's attached as an exhibit on the PUD because it's part of that. It will be folded into the PUD.
And that will eventually have to go to the town council because it has not been approved. That is the ordinance and the other documents that are attached.
Right.
Does the plan commission have to do anything where Mr. Leeser can put a shovel in the ground? If he's met, what does he have to do at this point? And he's probably asking the same question. What does he have to do right now where he can pick up a permit and put a shovel in the ground? And if we've already approved it, then push everything to next month, and we'll review everything and do it to next month if we've already approved the plat.
Because Mr. Leeser does not need the other piece of that puzzle tonight to get started.
Exactly.
Under an ideal circumstance, it would be proceeding together because that PUD ordinance is the zoning district, which the plat is supposed to comply with. So,
but we're not dealing in that right now. That's already been nuked. So
that's what I'm saying. It's already been done. So it's under staff review at this point. It's not really up for debate as part of this agenda item anymore. It's simply an attachment to that ordinance.
Roland, don't take offense to this, but I feel like I'm in a BZA meeting.
I'm not sure who's on first and what's on second.
Yeah. So what are we doing? I'm
so what you're being asked to do.
You said in an ideal scenario. Obviously, this isn't an ideal scenario. What do we have to do in as not an ideal scenario where we can move this forward? He can put a shovel in the ground, and we can come back and review everything next month when we have time.
I would say what you would need to do would be to table the planned unit development amendment, or approve it with condition, or issue a favorable recommendation with conditions.
And if we move to table it, does it prevent Mr. Leeser from getting started? I'm not clear about this either.
No, he has a conditional preliminary plat approval.
So we're not holding anything up because remember, guys, we still have to do a public hearing here. So I don't know on what yet, but starting down this path again, and every time we talk about this petition, it ends up in this kind of circular discussion. Now, how about, I would like to hear from the elected officials on our board on where are they when they go to their meetings in relation to this stuff?
In relation to what? This project or what?
And where we are in the process of moving it along. You guys aren't waiting as the town council for the planning commission to do anything on this development, are you?
From my understanding right now, from what Tom said, is that Jay can get started putting a shovel in the ground without us moving forward with this. Correct, Tom? Tom, is that correct?
That's kind of the deal that the plan commission
right
made
now. Right now. So the bulk of the plan commission right now would like to review everything here. And I think we should just have an opportunity to allow everybody to look at this maple leaf ordinance and actually discuss it at the next meeting that we have.
Mr. Chairman?
But this isn't gonna hold up Jay, and I don't want to hold up Jay, but if everybody is scratching their head, not understanding what's going on here, I think everybody should have the opportunity to kind of look at this stuff, and then we can nail this by next meeting.
Councilman Gardner, anything to add?
I'll let Roland, he has his hand up first, and I'll speak after him.
Well, Roland's talked a lot. We even heard from you.
All right, I'll yield. Next.
The site plan was approved back in February. Then we had the March delay that was tabled last month in April. That's when we split the engineering drawing so Jay could get moving forward with that. We approved that pending the staff review. The staff reviewed it after a week. And then on May 29th, that's when we, Dustin's letter exempting some of those issues, you know, to move forward with the site plan. So I don't see any reason to do anything tonight, actually. The engineering has been approved and the site plan has been approved. And I think we table this PUD discussion until the next plan committee meeting.
So is there a motion?
Hold on, we still got a motion. Go ahead, Roland.
Mr. Chairman, can you please let Mr. Leeser or Mr. Beach speak? I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here before we vote on anything.
Well, it's a pandemic. All bets are off. Go ahead, Mr. Leeser.
Yeah, this is
add to this.
My understanding was that we had to have the plans forwarded to the council and have it approved. It's along with our ordinance so that we could get a building permit. As it stands right now, the plans have been approved, but we don't have an ordinance adopting what we have laid out here. So I'm not sure that we could get a permit or even put it out for bid until we have the council's approval.
So the petitioner doesn't think he can get a building permit without the ordinance, yet the attorney and the planner says that he can. This is great.
Mr. Chairman, can you make it conditional on giving a permit for infrastructure and underground? That would take you in a month in the construction season and be able, there's a lot of work to do there prior to any building permit. You can give, we've worked before giving conditional permits for infrastructure prior to getting a foundation permit or a building permit.
I understand. What type of permit, Mr. Beach, were you trying to pull? Was it just underground?
We just need underground permits and to start.
And who told you that you needed the ordinance to get the underground?
Well, I think that the site plan needs to call ordinance in order to have a building permit issued. And you know, the roads we have laid out, the sites we have laid out are not under any of the existing ordinance provisions. So you'd be issuing a building permit for a site plan that you've approved, but it's not consistent with the ordinance that's on the book.
All right. So nobody specifically from the town told you couldn't get it without that ordinance.
That's correct. I mean, we have the old 1701 ordinance that's recorded on the property. And
I understand. Okay.
You'd be approving plans that are not consistent with the ordinance that's in existence at this time.
All right. So we still have a motion and a second, and we're under discussion. So I do know that Robert's rule of law. So that being said, moving forward, we're either doing a vote, we're doing an amendment, we're doing something, or as Mr. Speck said, this is going to turn into a BZA meeting.
Well, it's circular discussion. I would suggest that the people that move for the motion and seconded the motion withdraw the motion, and then we then insert a motion to table this matter. Because as I understand it, there would be no delay for Mr. Leeser to do what he has to do underground wise.
And I'd be willing to withdraw a motion as long as it doesn't, and I'm looking for recommendation from legal and staff to allow Mr. Leeser to walk into town hall, to get a permit, to get the infrastructure going.
If you table it, it's a complete delay on us getting the site.
Hold on, Mr. Leeser, because I mean, we need to hear the answer from staff and legal on whether or not, if this was tabled based on the approvals that have already been set forth by the Plan Commission, because I can guarantee you he's going to walk in there tomorrow and want a building permit.
Rightfully so. It's June.
It's going to get he wants an underground permit or an infrastructure permit.
Here's the attorney, Billy.
Well, are you looking to get curbs and roadways?
Who's talking?
Mr. Raffin, it's here. Mr.
All
Chair.
right.
Mr. Leeser, are you looking to get the sewer structures in, the curbs, the gutters, and the roadways? Is that what you're looking to put in?
Yes.
Yeah, correct.
That would be what we'd be doing right now.
Right. It's ridiculous, us as a commission, to hold this project up another month and not get that started.
I concur. I mean, especially when you start getting into building materials.
Again, the question is, can they get a building permit tomorrow if we don't do anything tonight? Mr. Wicklund or Mr. Vanderwoody?
Well, I don't issue the permits, and I'm not involved with the permit issuance, so I can't give an answer to that, regrettably. However, I think if you take a look at the agenda, you'll find that findings are anticipated approving the prior month's action, and you know, I mean, I think you're prepared to act on that. That would allow him, I believe, to put a shovel in the ground and to proceed. If you take a look at the last page of the agenda, let's take a look. Zoning ordinance, seeking to amend certain sections. That's the fences one. Let's see. Let me find it here. Just give me a minute.
I'm trying to find the findings of fact that you're referring to also, Mr. Wicklund.
Yeah, it's on the last page. Let me find it here.
Last page or what?
Here it is. It's item C. It's item C. Item C says PC 20-002 Maple Leaf Crossing by Jay Leeser, requesting preliminary plat approval to consolidate 2 lots into a 1-lot commercial subdivision. Now, we approved that last month, as everybody has recognized. This is the findings that is the following item that needs to be done. It's the business that has to be done. We can do, like you indicated, the PUD ordinance and the design standards next month. I don't issue the permits. Let's hear from Tom on who issues the permits, because I agree and think that you can proceed once you walk out of this room having approved those findings.
Tom, are you there?
Is there a question to me? Oh,
yeah.
The question to me is, can he have a permit? Well, I think that Dave Beach is right. The subdivision, as approved, should comply with the zoning ordinance, which is the planned unit development ordinance. However, in approving that plat last month, the Plan Commission implicitly waived the standards of the zoning ordinance to allow that to move forward. So with that being said, if the plat has been approved, typically that is sufficient to allow for underground work to begin. Now, there's an element of risk involved because the PUD has not been approved, right? So they're proceeding under the assumption that the zoning will get approved that would allow them to continue the project as they're proposing. So there's an element of risk in doing that, but yes, the town would permit them to do that.
Okay, here we are. We still have a motion in a second and a lot of discussion, and I still have to do a public hearing.
Well, Mr. Wicklund, just want to make sure I'm correct. I can withdraw my motion and table it if we're just going off the findings of fact later on. That would give them the preliminary plat approval to consolidate the 2 lots. That's what they need to get a permit then.
Yes, that's my opinion.
Then that being said, Mr. Chairman, I'll
Well, Mr. Raffin, hold on. Wouldn't you agree that we should have a public hearing before you make a motion to approve anything?
Well, you have a motion and a second. You already accepted that.
Well, now we're removing it, and then this is all hands on deck. So I don't know if I'm Robert's Rules of Law on this public hearing thing.
Well, I would take that motion off the floor to allow you to open up the public hearing.
Mr. Wicklund, how does that work? You have the book, not me.
Yeah, Tom, let me ask you this. How many times have we had a public hearing on this matter? I would argue we've had the public hearing. We've had the public hearing.
I don't believe we've had it for the PUD.
But we're not approving the
We're not
PUD,
voting on
we're
the
approving the
PUD.
findings.
I'm
We're
just
not
going to
acting on
findings
the
of
PUD.
fact.
That's
We're
right.
not voting on the PUD.
Well, there is
Correct.
no public hearing required for findings of fact. But we're not at that point yet because we're still on the agenda. We're still on agenda item 6.
6B. So we shouldn't have actually had any type of motion during this conversation right here at this time. So both the motion and the second should be negated all on its own.
Right.
Because that should have been done later on.
My motion was only on basing that Maple Leaf Crossing plan set that was already approved for that one lot subdivision, and not the other stuff anyways.
So there shouldn't be a question here. We shouldn't even be talking about this. Just open it up to public, Bill, and let's move on.
Please, somebody from the public have a comment so I could open and close this thing. Raise your hand. So Mr. Vanderwood, you got to remember, he's been doing this for a while. He's been through 2 tornadoes tonight. He needs to have a little bit of help here.
We do have a commenter here, Michael Gepfert.
Please step up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and what say you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I don't know that there have been very many public hearings regarding this.
And your name, sir?
Sorry, Michael Gepfert, 10380 Oxford Place.
Thank you.
I don't think there's been very much public hearing. I know you said that, but I've been trying to voice my opinion about a few things. I'm glad to see that you're looking to table this because I think haste makes waste. And as some of the council has already, or as some of the commission has already stated, you can't add parking spaces to 5 guys now. It's too late for that. So well, the last I spoke to the developer, I mentioned some of the biking concerns that I had. He mentioned that maybe that could be looked at during the traffic study. I see that the traffic study was on this agenda. I don't see anything that references bikes at all. And I really don't want to see this rush through. I don't want to see this take any longer. But I think we all want to see the success of this development. We want to see it opened up, but just don't want to see this rush through. I am not an expert. I do like to bike a lot, but I've mentioned this several times, not unfortunately in a public hearing. That's why I wanted to take the time to do that now. We have a lot of organizations locally. This development's being talked about as someplace that has, some very great bike trails that are going to be connected here. And we have, South Shore Trails, Rails to Trails, lots of individuals that are, I would say experts at, trails and biking routes and so forth. I'm not an expert, but just looking at the development, I can see, just from my experience in biking that there are some issues. The Maple Leaf, what is it? Maple Leaf Boulevard, the street to the north. You've got a street on the north side of this development with a bike route on the south side of that street. You're going to have cyclists that are riding into and out of this development, or at least passing by it on the north side of it, and you are going to have cars exiting to the north side to get onto Maple Leaf, to get out on that stoplight that's going to be put in. And if everyone could just think about this for 1 second, if you are exiting that parking lot and you are looking to get onto Maple Leaf, and Maple Leaf runs east-west, as you're exiting, you are going to look which way? You are only going to look left. You're going to look for oncoming traffic. You're going to look left. You're not going to see any traffic, and you're going to proceed just as everyone does everywhere where I bike in this town. And there are many places where we only have a bike path on one side of the street. Calumet is one of them. We do have sidewalks on the other side, but we have a large bike route on the west side of the street. And that's what this is going to be. We're going to have a bike lane on one side of the street. You're going to look left, you're going to look for oncoming traffic, and you're going to proceed. But there could be a biker coming from your right, and you will never see that bike. I've said it several times to several different people. Have someone look at this. Have someone maybe put eyes on it that is a biker. Plenty of great organizations that I've mentioned that could easily voice their opinion as to what can be done. I see this one, and I'm no expert, but it's pretty glaring. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak on this petition?
No.
I hear noise, but I don't see anything.
Going
once. Going twice. 3 times. All right, I'm closing the public hearing, bringing it back to the board. What say you?
Once
Somebody's
again,
TV's on. Hey, Bill, is
Can
that
you
your
mute
TV?
everybody that's not?
Everybody's muted except for the board.
Okay.
And Bill P. Not sure.
There you go.
well, Bill, based on the conversations we had tonight regarding this, my recommendation or my motion would be to table this as the findings of facts are sufficient enough for Mr. Leeser to get a permit to get started.
I will second that motion.
There's a motion and a second. What's the discussion? So we're tabling
Hold
with
on
the
one
condition.
second.
Is it with the condition, Roland, of a being able to pull an underground permit?
That underground and the road permit, you know, for curbs and gutters and underground.
Almost need to amend the motion to make sure that when he walks in the building department tomorrow morning, that they call Mr. Wickland so they can then issue that permit.
And that they will.
Well, the issue, the
honest with
permit
you.
would be for the underground infrastructure as well as being able to lay out for curbs and roadways to get started.
I would, if I can interrupt, I would just
Go ahead,
ask our attorney whether or not you can make a motion to table with a contingency like that. I'm not sure you can
Well, I guess
take no action with a contingency.
Guys, this is a circle jerk. I mean, really? What are we doing here?
Yeah, I think
We
if you
wasted an hour and done nothing.
Yeah, pass the findings on page 2, and then you'll have authority
No, we lost you.
to
I lost.
put a shovel in the ground.
So do we not do anything with
Basically,
this?
I can make a motion just to table. Oh, my.
Well, this is what happens when you do it at the last minute. I learned this from my mom, the teacher.
What about if the minutes reflect that it has been represented to the Planning Commission by the council, Wickland, that if the findings of fact would be approved, that Mr. Leeser will be entitled to a building permit? Can we put that as a record in the minutes?
Who's that to, Mr. Friedman?
I'm sorry?
Statement.
I'm sorry, Bill, I didn't hear what you said.
Is that a question to somebody in particular, or is that a general statement?
Suggestion. It's a suggestion that if we put, we state in the minutes, not as a motion, that that Mr. Wickland has represented to us that if we approve the findings of fact, that Mr. Leeser will be entitled to a building permit for the underground structure. then I think we can effectively move to table.
Mr. Wickland, would you like to comment on that?
I'm going to go back to where I was, and some of the confusion is agenda item 6B. I think that's what we started with. Everybody agreed they needed more time to review the ordinance and the other attachments. What I said was, knowing that the council and others want to move forward quickly with this project, to put a shovel in the ground, the way to do it is pass the findings that are on the last page, items C, PC 20-002, which is what was approved last month. You always take official action by way of findings after you've passed an ordinance, either the same day or the next month. So my suggestion was simply to move the matter forward, to go ahead, approve the findings, and then Mr. Leisure can proceed to put a spade in the ground. Over the next 30 days, the developer, the town, and staff can get together and wrap up their analysis of the petition, the review of the ordinance, and the attachments that go with it.
But Mr. Wickland, I understand what you're saying, but we're stuck in this particular agenda item. We can't leave this one to go to another one 5 items down.
Well, I would say then table 6B, address 6C and D, and then go to the findings. I don't know that there's a motion outstanding. Is there a motion before the commission?
Motion to table.
Motion to table what? PC 20-003? That's fine. Table it. That means.
Motion.
What was the motion?
That was Roland's motion to table PC 20-003, and it was seconded by Brian.
So I call
vote on it, and move on.
I call for the vote on the motion to table.
So be it. Mr. Vanderwood.
Councilor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Councilor Gardner.
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
An exhausted yes.
Roland Raffin. Hold on, you're muted.
Yes. Yeah.
Brian Specht.
An overly exhausted yes.
And Chairman Baker.
A completely uncomfortable yes. All right, so with all kind of vim and vigor, we move on to PC 20-005. Oh, jeez. Town of Munster Plan Commission seeking to amend certain sections of the Munster zoning ordinance related to fences and side yards.
Mr. Chairman, it is the public. This is a public hearing.
And this is C on public hearing.
Okay, I will explain this briefly if I may. This was presented at a preliminary hearing last month. Boils down to this. When we amended the zoning ordinance, we clarified some things that with respect to fences and side yards. And we set the minimum or the maximum height at 42 inches, which is consistent with a front yard fence. We've gotten a number of residents who have wanted to install 6-foot fences in their side yards, and we've denied those permits, but we did a survey of the town and determined that it's fairly common throughout town. And so we're recommending this really minor amendment to the code which would permit, it would raise the maximum height from 42 inches for a fence in a side yard to 6 feet. Again, this would be a situation where that's a favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation to the town council. In the staff report, I've shown the specific text amendments that would be required to the zoning district. There's a handful of them because it is for the single family, the 2 single family zoning districts, the 1 and 2 family zoning district, and the multi-family.
Okay, there it has it. Bring it to the board. What say you? Any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, let's open it for public hearing.
Yep, I agree.
Is there anybody who wants to speak on this particular matter? I'm sure they all went to bed. Once.
I don't see any hands up.
Who has a hand up?
I see no hands.
3 times. I'm going to close the public hearing. Bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we give a favorable recommendation to the town council for this.
There's a motion. Is there a second? I'm assuming Mr. Friedman is all of this information that was provided by the staff.
I've reviewed it.
Now there's a motion to forward with a lot of specific references.
Was there a second? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, I haven't heard. Is there a second to the motion?
All right, so your motion to approve
I'll make a motion, a second to approve.
Okay.
Yeah, Roland.
All right, is there any discussion? My only question is there seems to be a lot of specifics in the staff report to which there's a litany of product types here.
A litany of, I'm sorry.
Product types, districts.
Yeah, so there's 4 districts that this applies to. And that's why there's the multiple amendments, because it's a standard within each one of those districts. So it's the same amendment in each district. But what it says is I'm eliminating here where it says the 42 inches maximum in a front and side yard. So I'm eliminating at and side. And then it says otherwise 6 feet maximum in setback, in rear setback. So that should say rear setback, but changing that to side and rear yards. So I'm taking it out of the front yard 42 inch category and putting it in the backyard 6 foot category. And that's for a single family, the 2 single family districts, the 1 and 2 lot or 1 and 2 family district, and then the multifamily. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There's a motion and a second. Is the motion encompassing that, Mr. Wicklund, or is it need to be amended?
I think it encompasses it.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Nope.
I can't see anybody. Blur over. Mr. Vanderwood.
Councilor Kulturitis?
Yes.
Councilor Gardner?
Yes.
Stuart Friedman?
Yes.
Roland Raffin?
Yes.
Brian Specht?
Yes.
Chairman Baker?
Yes. All right. I correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Wicklund, but I can move around on the agenda as the chair, correct?
You can. You can.
All right. Then is there a possibility, or am I breaking some rule by jumping out of public discussion and going down to this Maple Leaf thing while we're still thinking about it and getting that approved?
You can do that. You can do that.
All right, so then I'm going to call up the findings of fact of PC 20-002 Maple Leaf Crossing LLC J. Lees are requesting preliminary plan approval to consolidate 2 lots into 1 lot commercial subdivision at 9450 Calumet Avenue to approve the findings of fact. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman,
Is there a second?
I will second that, Mr. Chairman.
And then there's a second. Is there any discussion?
Chairman, may I make one statement? With respect to the
certainly.
There was a condition placed on the approval, and that condition was staff review and approval. So there was one additional condition that was made as part of the motion.
So there's a condition that's not listed on the report that's on the agenda for approval.
Go ahead and add it.
That's correct. There's a line here, so we can add that condition along with any others that you may want to.
So
Right.
state the wording of paragraph 4 before I vote on it.
Tom?
I will read it from the minutes so that we have it accurate. Motion that was made was to approve preliminary plat contingent upon staff review and approval of the engineering plans.
I'll amend that motion to allow that.
And I will agree to the amendment of that.
So there's a motion and a second on this. Is there any other discussion?
No, I call for the vote, Mr. Chairman. I want to move this along.
You and I both, Mr. Friedman, but I still have to follow this Robert rules. I can't see everybody because I'm stuck in a pandemic. So what else do we got? Is it all good, Mr. Vanderwood? Nobody's raising their hand or anything?
Well,
please call for the roll call vote.
Okay, Councilor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Councilor Gardner.
Yes.
Stuart Friedman.
Yes.
Roland Raffin.
Yes.
Brian Specht.
Yes.
Chairman Baker.
Yes. Next up, I'm doing this findings of fact is PC 20-03 Maple Leaf Crossing LLC. J. Lees are requesting amendments to the Munster Business Complex Plan Unit Development at 9450 Calumet Avenue.
That should be tabled.
Tabled.
That's tabled.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a recommendation to table, or do we have to do anything? Do I have to make a recommendation to table?
I would table it.
I'll make a recommendation
Motion to
to
the
table.
table. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And a second. Any discussion? Be there none. Mr. Vanderwood.
Councilor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Councilor Gardner.
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki. I'm sorry. Stuart Friedman.
Yes.
Roland Raffin.
Yes.
Brian Specht.
Yes.
Chairman Baker.
Yes. All right.
Mr.
Jumping all
Mr.
over
Vanderwood, I
just,
need you to, Mr. Vanderwood, I need you to approve my phone to get into the meeting because my iPad's dying.
Okay. I wish I had that authority, Mr. Speck, but I'll ask Mr. Vanderwood to let Mr. Speck in on his phone.
All right, you're in.
Have an
Thank you.
electrical plug for his computer. So next up, we're going back to public hearings. PC 20-006, Town of Munster Plan Commission seeking to amend certain sections of the Munster zoning ordinance related to gasoline station signs.
Okay, again, this was presented at the preliminary hearing last month. The current code does not permit changeable copy on a gas station monument sign. There's a sort of a typo in the code that says it's permitted on a gasoline pump. We're hoping to amend the code to clarify that it's actually permitted on the monument sign rather than the pump. And we're also changing it so that it would permit electronic or digital letters and numbers rather than simply manually changeable magnetic numbers. 10 of the 12 gas stations in town already have electronic numbers and letters. So our thought is that it would make sense. The horse has left the barn on this issue, and we may as well allow the other two to be the same as the other 10. So essentially there's two modifications to the code. And actually, no, there's a single, which is this section S here. Basically, it gets rid of a sign on a gasoline pump and changes it to a monument sign located at a gasoline station with physically changeable or static electronic or digital letters and numbers that conform to all other monument sign standards.
Okay, so thank you for that. My first question is, what about those that are grandfathered in with the pylon sign?
So if they have a pylon sign, they will be subject to the non-conforming, they'll be considered legal non-conforming. So all those triggers that we talked about with the use variance, destruction greater than 50%, substantial modification, removal, all of those will trigger the expiration of their legal nonconforming status. But if none of those events happen, they are able to maintain the sign as it is. So,
all right, so the guy that's got the pylon sign that doesn't have the digital on it, and he goes and pulls a permit to put the digital on that pylon sign, you're going to give it to him?
No, I don't think so.
Monument sign.
It's a modification, right? So you're actually increasing the intensity.
You don't really enforce it, so it doesn't, you know, whatever.
But it says monument sign in here.
Right, that's my point.
Right. So they can't do it on a pole sign.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve electronic or changeable static copy and digital letters on monument signs.
I'll second.
There a second?
Just to be clear, this is a recommendation to the town council, so that would be a favorable recommendation.
That would be a favorable recommendation to town council.
I will second that as stated.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Scanning. Mr. Vanderwood.
Councilor Kulturitis?
Yes.
Councilor Gardner?
Yes.
Stuart Friedman?
Yes.
Roland Raffin?
Yes.
Brian Specht is muted. Let me check.
Yeah, he called in. You probably didn't let him in.
He's in.
Yes.
And Chairman Baker.
Yes. Okay.
What do you got next at us, Bill? What are you throwing at us next?
Well, I'm throwing in there that I opened it up for public hearing and closed the public hearing too.
Oh yeah, that's.
So thank you for the help, everybody.
There's only 5 people left on this call.
Yeah. So no development plan reviews. The findings of fact. Next one is PC 20-005. Town of Munster Plan Commission seeking to amend certain sections of the Munster ordinance related to fences and side yards. I'm assuming this is the one we just did.
It is.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve these findings of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Raffin. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any modifications, Mr. Wicklund or Mr. Vanderwood, to this one?
No.
I guess I'm just wondering.
How about this? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
I'm just wondering
Town of
if
Munster Planning Commission seeking to amend certain sections of the Munster zoning ordinance related to gasoline station signs. Is there a motion to approve?
Yes.
No.
Is there a second?
Yes, Mr. Raffin.
Any discussion? Be there none, roll call, voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah. Aye.
Opposed? Moving on. We're done. Other business. Anybody else want to talk more?
Nope.
Next regular scheduled meeting is July 14th, 2020 at 7:30. According to Mr. Speck, we'll never, ever make that 7:30. And we'll take a motion to adjourn, assuming hopefully that we're meeting together for bowling night next time.
Motion to adjourn.
I look forward to it.
Mr. Raffin.
There's a second.
Mr. Raffin.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for helping make this a better place.
Thank you.
Hopefully next month goes a little smoother. Good luck with those approvals tomorrow, Mr. Wicklund and Mr. Vanderwood.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.